but I didn't attend.
You were there in spirit, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Eliza's having trouble with her audio and video. If someone is in touch with her, it looks like. Okay, so if there are no other corrections or comments, we will accept the minutes of the February 17th meeting with the edits suggested by Sandy. So now we have, oh yeah.
Krista, it's Tanya. Sorry, we're sorting out the desktop here so that Erin has some access, but could you tell me, were the minutes accepted without corrections?
They were accepted with the correction that Sandy was not in attendance, so we deleted her name from the commission members in attendance.
Thank you.
Okay, so chair and commissioners report. Any commissioners wanting to make a report at this time? Okay, I have a couple things that I will add and then see if anybody else wants to chime in. I want to officially welcome Peggy Bill to the commission. She's somewhere. Yay. And Peggy, so at the last meeting when the new commissioners joined us, Marilyn and Amy, they gave a little brief self-intro. Would you like to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad we got through that last little snafu. So I've been on and off Lopez since I was a kid, and have moved back here more recently. I was involved with land conservation when I was working in Seattle, and I worked with, it's now called Forterra, and was Cascade Land Conservancy when I started, which is 3 of us, and now it's 50. So I got out just in time. Anyway, and I've been involved a lot in agriculture in the San Juans. When I moved back up, I was the ARC coordinator. So I've been involved with a lot of the different farming issues and activities and people, and that's been really fun. And other background in environmental work also off island. So anyway, I'm really glad to be here. I was a land bank commissioner way back in the beginning. So, and it was kind of a different time then. So it's fun to be back. Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. I had another thing on my list. We were going to discuss again or revisit having a liaison or representative on a couple of the committees, county committees. One was the climate and sustainability. Did we determine if someone would like to attend those meetings? I think those are quarterly. And then the other committee or work group was the clean air group. And I think they meet monthly. We have not officially been asked, I think, to be on that group, but I think the climate and sustainability is looking for a land bank liaison. Lincoln, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, and Marilyn's agreed to, well, I'll let her speak for herself.
Marilyn has agreed to take that position. Thank you. I'd be happy to. It's an interest of mine. I'm sorry I haven't delved into it yet, but I will be following up and trying to acquaint myself with Jim Skog's file on the things that he observed when he was participating. So yes, I'd be honored. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Lincoln, are we okay with letting the clean water possible participation sit?
Yeah, I don't think they've asked for a liaison.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure there's anything for us to do there.
Okay.
Question, is the Clean Water Committee, is that what used to be the Water Resources Committee?
I'm not really sure whether there's still, I think that's right. It's the Clean Water Advisory Committee, which I think absorbed the other one, but also includes surface water and basically what used to be stormwater.
Okay. And then a couple semi-housekeeping things. Brian asked, we had talked about resituating our meeting, our third Friday meetings, in hopes of finding a place where we could have more space to actually meet together. And but it sounds like we've acquired an owl, which may allow us to return to the Mullis Center on the third Fridays and have enough space for people to come and meet in public if they want to. So is that correct, Tanya? What I'm saying about the owl and
Yeah, it is. We've got an owl on order, and I have a message into the Mullis Center with that request, if we can go back to the third Friday. So they're generally pretty responsive. We'll know soon.
okay. Sandy?
What is an owl?
Tanya?
A meeting owl, Sandy, it looks, I can send you all of the information, but it looks like one of those, a portable speaker. It's probably about yay high. It literally has a face. It looks like an owl, two eyes that are cameras, and it picks up, it does what's happening now, but it sits in the middle of a table or wherever you like to position it, and it will do a panoramic view of your meeting room, but then also allows people to come in and be on there as well. Like, it works with Zoom and things. So we don't have to have, it's the camera and the audio is the simple way of putting it, and it's portable. So it's something you can take to any room and then host a hybrid meeting. That's the short answer. I made it too long.
So Tanya and I are going to work together before the next meeting. Well, we've got community conversations coming up and stuff too. So we will practice with that technology and find out if it's everything we hope it will be. So I'm not going to poll about any change in meeting. We're going to leave it on the third Friday for now and hope that Mullis Center welcomes us back. That would be great. And then I have just one more thing. There is a request to consider a second comment period at the end of the meeting for public comment. I'll defer to the commission. I don't have any issue with that. I attend a couple of different organizations that do that, because then the public, the ones that have stayed for the whole meeting and heard our discussion, may have some input. So we'll kind of take a poll here to see. The only caveat I would have is that when we do finally start to meet in public again, if some of us return to Friday Harbor, to the Mullis Center, and we have a time schedule that syncs up with a ferry, that if we're getting pressed to hightail it down to the ferry landing to catch an 11:35 or something, I may choose not to allow for that second public comment period, because that's it could put commissioners waiting another 3 or 4 hours to get home. So that's the only difficulty I see putting that at the end, because we sometimes have been crunched in the past when we were back at Mullis. Are there any strong feelings, yay or nay, with the commission about a second public comment period at the end of the meeting?
I think that's fine.
Personally, I think it's a great idea, because people can be stimulated by the meeting and frustrated that they can't participate. Thanks.
Mike, Sandy, Peggy?
I would agree. I think it might be helpful to open it up.
Sandy, any strong feelings?
I'm in favor of it. I think anything we can do to be more accessible, engaging, and hear from people in the community is a good thing.
Well, that's the majority. Mike, do you have any strong feelings against that idea?
No, I don't know if my mic's on, but I can't.
It is now.
I can't tell. It's good. I'm okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any last chance commissioner report? Brian?
Yeah, Krista, I had also requested a report on the outreach, and Communications Committee. I don't know whether you had that on the agenda someplace else or if this is
It's coming under outreach.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, hearing no other comments, we'll move on to the partnership update. I think Angela's on the call today.
Good morning, commissioners and
morning.
members of the public. Angela Anderson from SJPT. I am here to report, and many of you may probably already know, but we have the successful closing of the Lopez Hill Addition conservation easement, which occurred on March 8th. So many thanks to our partners here at the Land Bank and the community for its support in and funding this project. We fundraised for over 2 years to be able to purchase the conservation easement and protect the property in perpetuity with the land bank. So excited that we were able to get to the close on that project, and just in time. We've got a grant update at the end of the month. So it's great that we were able to close here in March. The next update I have is we've been working steadily now on the next campaign, and that is the Katy Mountain campaign. So that Katy Mountain campaign, now that we've closed Lopez, we've officially launched the Katy Mountain campaign to purchase the conservation easement. SJPT staff and the Land Bank staff conducted a site visit recently to discuss management on the property in terms of the conservation easement, as well as fundraising opportunities. The terms of the easement will be similar to the Lopez Hill addition, but we are also evaluating integration of language pertaining to protection of cultural values as well as cultural access. The cooperative agreement also includes the bargain sale for the CE in the amount of $425,000 with a closing date on or before December 29th. So that the goal is to end this and close this project by the end of this year. So we're excited about that, and there's going to be more information to come in the upcoming dispatch, which is going to be coming out in April for the Preservation Trust.
Great. Thank you for that. Congratulations on Lopez Hill. That's exciting.
Yep. And we've got the obviously the Katy Mountain project for the end of this year, and then ongoing fundraising for the North Shore CE. So we're staying plenty busy with the partnership projects.
Any questions for Angela from the commission? All right. Well, thank you for all your hard work. Glad to see you here today. It's nice to see you. Then moving on, we have Christine Minnie on the call. I'm not sure where she is, but she's joining us. Christine, would you like to give a council update?
I sure would. I'm in my living room.
Oh, nice.
I realize I look a little dark. I'm sorry. I can't fix that. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
To the Friday morning edition of Council Update from my living room. Some time ago, but definitely after last month's Land Bank meeting, Council held a special meeting where we gathered with the agency responders of the Aleutian Isle incident. And for those of you who don't know, though there probably aren't many, that was the fishing vessel that sank off the west side of San Juan Island late last summer. This was a really important post-incident meeting because we were able to ask questions, understand opportunities for improvement all the way around, and show our appreciation for all that did respond. Those agencies who gathered were the Coast Guard, the Department of Ecology, Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, and of course our own Department of Emergency Management. This week's Board of Health meeting concluded with an unveiling of the new mobile public health van. And I suspect those of you on San Juan Island have likely seen it because it's hard to miss. And you will understand that all on the Outer Islands when you have your opportunity to see it. It is called the Lucy B. Lucy B is an homage to an intrepid woman of historical significance that did provide medical treatment throughout the islands in the late 1800s. Her official name, or her birth name, was Lucinda Elizabeth Stewart, and then she became a Boyce. She's Lucinda Elizabeth Stewart Boyce, to be exact. This new van will bring comprehensive public health resources to residents where they are, so be on the lookout. We're really excited about it. And so is the Department of Health. They're so excited. It's a really great, I think, shot in the arm after such a long go with COVID to be true. The county is preparing this year's lot of surplus vehicles for auction. So if you've ever considered owning an excavator or a 10-yard dump truck or a boom mower, it's almost your chance. There will be a special link on the county website to the auction itself once the public process has been completed. This next note is of note, maybe more to Mike, because at one point he had asked about it, but for all interested, the council received an update from Wendy Welch, who is the chief of the groundwater systems section for U.S. Geological Survey, on the groundwater recharge study that is currently underway. That was during our February 28th meeting. And though this study is not yet complete, and there will be a ton more to come, it's worth watching. So I will put a link to the meeting, so you have to watch our council meeting, but I can put that in the chat after I'm done here so that you can tag into that if you'd like. Council is currently reviewing 2 RFQs, requests for qualifications submitted for the Argyle Lots Affordable Housing Project proposal. Both respondents will be presenting their proposals to council on April 4th, if anybody should be interested in what those look like. A long-awaited and congratulations, very well done to all involved in the successfully attaining or completing the conservation easement on the Lopez Hill addition. And if I was remiss in saying this last month, I apologize. I can't remember. I suspect I did, but either way, congratulations, Marilyn O'Connor and Amy Trainer. And for this month, congratulations, Peggy. I'm glad you're here. So happy almost solstice. I look forward to outdoor morning coffee and light-filled evenings.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Any questions for Christine? I just ask that you don't publish that surplus vehicle auction anywhere close to my husband's computer. That we just don't need that.
Okay.
And then I just had a quick question on the Lucy B. So that's a mobile medical. Is it going to all the islands then?
Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily have a schedule yet. I mean, it's really just literally been on island about a week, but they are so gung-ho. I wouldn't be surprised that they don't have a plan in place for the other islands sooner than later.
Yeah, that's great. Very good. Thank you so much. Glad to have you join us today.
Thank you. Oh, speaking of that, though, I do have a small need to leave at 10 o'clock for another meeting, but I will be coming back.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions for Christine, we'll turn it over to Aaron for a finance update. Aaron with an A.
Thank you, Krista. First, the first announcement I guess I'd like to mention is for new commissioners that would like a financial overview of the land bank. Marilyn has reached out, so I've put some information together for her and we'll be meeting soon. But any of the new commissioners that would like to schedule a time, send me an email and I'll kind of walk you through the process of how I feel it's best to coordinate and set these up. I feel working with each of you individually based on what your questions are or level of interest to specific aspects of the financial operation is easier on an individual basis than as a group in coordinating the group together. So just a reminder to reach out if you're interested there. Secondly, I was reviewing this morning the REIT projections for February that I attached in the meeting materials, and I noticed that the February number was not complete. So for the month of February, REIT was 170,000 for a total to date in for the year of 500,000. So if you want to make the correction on your own sheet, or just be aware that I did see that needed to be corrected this morning. So it was not 85,000, which, you know, that's extremely low, but it did end up at 170,000. So I wanted to make that clear. Last, the explanation of funds that I included in the commission materials here. This was asked for last commission meeting, or the one before possibly, as a quick, easy to understand document of how the two funds interact. I will open it up if anybody has any comments on, you know, making this easier to understand. I did run it by Mike Pickett, and Lincoln had a look at it, so we put our eyes on it. So I just wanted to reach out to the rest of you and see if this is what you guys were looking for. If not, we can always edit it and change it up a little bit.
Brian has a question, and then Sandy.
Not a question, but Aaron, I just wanted to say that the explanation is really helpful. Very, very good explanation of the components of our funds, and I thought the whole thing was really good. I did want to make one comment about the graphs that you usually present. The one that's really useful to me, and quick look summary, is the year-to-year cumulative bar graph. The two line graphs, and especially the month-to-month, I just find impossible to read. It's pretty unsuitable for framing, but to me not helpful. But anyway, the total presentation and the numbers are great. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Sandy?
I too wanted to thank you, Aaron, for including that, and then also to suggest that that it stay included, so that anytime we get a financial update, if we're doing quarterly, I can't remember what our, I think that's what our schedule is, that it be included as a cover page explanation, so we can refresh our memories, or any one member of the public downloading just that month would have the explanation to go with it. I think that's very helpful. And then as far as the line graph that's difficult to read, what if we got it down to just say the last 5 years, or reduce the number of years so that we can make it more legible?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. I did, after a public comment a couple months ago, I did bring it down to 10 years. I'm more than happy to send it next month with 5 years, see what you guys think. And if you guys feel like it's still not very legible or useful, we can address that then. And as far as having the explanation of funds included in the quarterly reports, I can definitely do that. It is also in that virtual commission binder that I sent out a link to from SharePoint. I think Sandy and Brian are the only two I didn't hear from on that. If you guys had issues with accessing that virtual binder, feel free to reach out to me and try and make that happen for you. Other than that, that's it for me this month.
Thank you, Aaron. That's great. So I think we decided at the last meeting, that we were adding finance back in as a monthly short update, but we will stay with the quarterly detailed updates. So just to clarify that finance is coming back every month now by request. So I'm thrilled to see that it wasn't $85,000 in the REIT. That was a little stomach flipping when I saw that. So now we're back in 2015, 16, 17 range. So that's great. Appreciate the correction. Any other questions or comments for Aaron? Okay, thanks again, Aaron.
You're welcome.
So director's report. We're hoping to have some action on the strategic plan request for proposals. Lincoln?
Yes, so you all have the latest draft of the request for proposals on the strategic plan. I'm not gonna summarize. I'm just gonna ask for feedback. I think we've been through a number of drafts on this, and thank you to Krista, Brian, and Mike for going round and round. And I think we've got something that makes a lot of sense. So all I'm doing here is just wanting to know if there's additional feedback. I did hear from Mike Thomas, he's going to provide some feedback as well, which would be great. But I think we're getting really close to getting ready to put this out. So
I'll open it up to anybody who has feedback on this version.
A question. I think it looks really great. I don't know where to put my hand up, but I'll just jump right in. I'm curious about where the questions came from. Did you all brainstorm those questions, or are those questions that people have been asking, general public and others?
Well, it's a combination, really. It is questions that we have heard definitely from people and boiled down a bit. And then we had a few other questions as well, but these are meant really as an example. I think we'll have an opportunity once we get a consultant to work through exactly what questions we want to ask. But this is just a sampling.
Sandy?
Yes, two things. I sent Lincoln some comments last night. Overall, I think it's great. My two questions are, one, there's on page 2 at the bottom, we expect the project to include the following, and it says development of recommendations regarding the plan's implementation and support structure. And what I'm wondering is support structure, is that related to staffing in terms of, are we adequately staffed to achieve the goals that we lay out? Is that part of what we're trying to do here? It seems like at some point it would be important concurrently to be making sure that we have the resources to do what we set out to do as our goals. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that partly we're going to have to see what the level of expertise is of the consultant. Some of them are going to be very strong in that regard of looking at staffing questions. Others may not be, but certainly the basic level we're looking for here is getting an idea of, as we come up with plans and objectives, goals, etc., do we have an adequate number of staff to accomplish those? So whether it's going to get into the question of staffing structure or not, I think that's still kind of an question, and we'll hash that through with the consultant.
Okay, and then my next question is kind of more of a comment, not a question. As I was reading through the list of questions that we're hoping to answer, I'm fuzzy on how much we're looking for answers from the public to help shape the direction versus in working with us internally. Have we really determined that yet, or I'm just a little fuzzy. I know public input would be a component, and just like to hear anything you want to share about how you would envision public input in helping to shape the questions and answers.
Yeah, I'll lead off and let the other folks pitch in here too, but it's really a combination. So some of these questions are meant very specifically for the commission itself and staff to answer. You know, things like, are the current stewardship efforts sustainable? It's really a question for people who are familiar with the budget and our revenue and understanding, you know, how much we're spending on stewardship, to look at and come to some conclusions going forward. That's obviously shaped a bit by public perception and what kinds of stewardship activities we should be doing. But I would see all of these really starting as an internal question, with some of them being put out to the public as appropriate. And I'll let other folks pick that up.
Brian? I'm calling on Brian because I know we've worked on this and he has some opinions on public input.
Yeah, okay. I agree with what Lincoln says about the order in which to approach that. I think my opinion has been that the strategic plan is primarily for the commission and staff, primarily an internally focused process that would result in a draft strategic plan that we would then take out to the public as part of the REIT campaign.
Mike, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions about this, how we gather information from the public, when we gather it, and I'm hoping that our consultants will give us some fresh ideas, because it seems to me that we need a broad base of response to things like, should we be doing less acquisition and more stewardship? I mean, we have fixed amount of funds. I mean, there are just a number of things that we need to know that the public thinks. And when we do these, and we do these listenings and things, it seems like we have a real small group of people that are responding. I'd like to see if the consultants could actually find ways or propose ways that we can get a broader participation. And in particularly some of the decision makers and the influencers that we have in the county that are very interested in this subject. I'd really like to know what they think should be the direction of the land bank over the next 10 years. So I don't know that we know exactly how to do this or when to do this, and I'm hoping we'll get some help from the consultants.
And I see your hand up, Sandy. I'll speak because I was on that working group, and I think we've come to some agreement that there will be an initial draft or a kick at the can through the commission and staff on what we believe to be our future challenges or opportunities, and then bringing those to the public to see if we're actually even in the ballpark of what our community wants. But I feel pretty confident that this strategic plan will involve public input. will involve genuine and authentic public input. And I, like Mike, I'm hoping that depending on the qualifications of these consultants, that we are able to engage some people that will help us get measurable input from our community instead of just the small turnouts that we've had in the past. But this will not become a final document without active community involvement. I'm going to ask, Marilyn had her hand up. Comments, go ahead.
Just quickly, first of all, I was curious as to whether the land bank has ever engaged with a consultant on a strategic plan before, because I'm not aware. Secondly, there's a typo on the bottom of the first page, between, you probably got that. But thirdly, I just wanted to share my real concerns, which I spoke to a little bit at our last meeting, about how this intersects with the REIT campaign, because people are already in discussion about the REIT campaign in the general community, and we're going to need just to find somebody who's really good at finessing public comment in such a way that we're not having a pre-vote on the campaign before we've even done the campaign. And I'm really, I'm nervous about that. I just want to share that. So have we done this before? And if so, what kinds of responses have we had from the RFP? No.
We have
okay.
not.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Sandy.
I think Amy had her hand raised.
Oh, I don't see her on my screen. Sorry, Amy.
No, it's okay. I was just waving hello and good morning since I had
okay.
everything.
Okay.
Amy's back from a literal train wreck.
Yeah.
Right.
That is true.
Got it. So my next question, it appears to be beyond the scope of the strategic plan, but I just wanted to put it out there as wondering how we might address this, or maybe it is part of it. As part of our process or the ordinance, it says that we will follow or use the basis of the open space plan in targeting and prioritizing acquisitions and protection areas. And I'm wondering if, when we're complete with the strategic plan, are we going to be down in that granular level at all? What document can we end up with that helps guide target areas? And if it's outside the scope of this, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up as something I also think is important to plan for.
So Lincoln, I think it's an important question, but I'd really like to stay focused on the approval of this document. The timeline requires, it's tight if we want to get this going because it needs to go to council, etc. The timeline's on the last page. So if we could hold that question, because I don't think it directly applies to this document. You can correct me if you want, anybody. I'm happy with that, but I just like to move on with approval of the RFP. Amy, you're muted, I think.
Sorry. So I do, this is Amy, everybody, that I do actually have a comment. And again, I apologize for being late. I just literally a train wreck. I think this generally looks good, but my concern, or only small concern, would be that the framing of these 9 questions, I kind of feel like maybe we will get there, and then these might be the questions, but I feel like they're maybe a little too in the weeds, and they are a little too focused. And I know we want to give the consultant some clear direction, right? But I feel like these questions need to come up a good 10,000 feet, or just maybe not include them, at least in the RFP. And so that once we would then engage and select, the right sort of strategic savvy person to carry us forward in this process, then maybe we would present, here's our initial list of questions, but we would refine that with them. But I think putting these questions out to the public now might I kind of share a little bit of what Marilyn's comment and question was. So my, to the extent I would make a motion, it would be to strike all of these questions and then approve the rest of this. And if that's too much, I will defer to the sort of the group here, but that was my kind of initial reaction in looking at this. Thanks. Not that they're not good. It's just we're not ready to put this out to the public yet. Thanks.
So I'm going to assume, don't want to assume anything, but let's say we can have discussion without an official motion, or if you'd like to make a motion and we get a second, we can have discussion. What's your preference, Amy, in terms of following up on your statement?
So I would definitely welcome hearing everybody else's thoughts about my comments. And then if everybody's like, no, I'm fine. If everybody sort of generally agrees, I would be happy to make a motion.
Okay. I think we'll go around the commission on this. So let's give this some thought. This was discussed in the planning of the RFP. And, detail, not detail, desire to give direction to consultants, to give them a heads up on what we were thinking. But this really is a commission-based document. So let's take some time and look at, Amy's suggestion could be to just eliminate all or bring them up to a higher, more generalized elevation. And I know Brian's got his hand up, and he's probably ready to go more than anybody right now. So go ahead, Brian.
Krista, I actually had my hand up for a comment on a different subject, but I'll address this one. And my comment is just that this is not. The RFP is not going out to the public. It's going out to prospective consultants. And I think the guy that has advocated for the most specificity and in that sense for us to suss out the questions that we want to ask and to answer for ourselves as a commission and staff. So I would advocate for leaving those questions in.
And I will do counterpoint because we've had this discussion, and my feeling on these is that I really want the public, this is their land bank, and this is the vision that's being set for the next 5 or 10 years for us. And I don't want to start the process with the public feeling like we've already decided what we're going to do, and this is, at the end is their chance to agree or disagree. So I had never thought so grandly as to go and eliminate all the questions. That sounds very freeing to me. But so I'm leaning in Amy's camp, because I feel like how do we know? We're acting like we know the questions before we've even gone through the process of trying to figure out which are the important questions. I know we have a lot of recurring topics, but this is a little bit different for me. So that's what I would say. Another commissioner, anybody want to raise?
I would weigh in and kind of concur with maybe pulling back from the questions, because I was a little stumped right from the beginning as I asked. It's like, well, where do these questions come from? Because they are quite specific. And so I think maybe, there could be kind of a hybrid approach, which would be, we expect that this strategic plan will address, stewardship priorities, acquisition priorities, blah, blah, like that. So just kind of lay it out really generally that way. One of the things that I've been wondering about, and I don't know, and maybe this is something everybody already knows about, but I've been really curious and want to make sure that we also include some analysis of the last REIT reauthorization, because there were some surprises that came up at that time. And I want to make sure that we have the consultant really take a look at that and pull that up again, so we don't run into those same problems. We're going to have other ones that are going to come up, but I want to make sure that's included as well. And personally, I would like to know what those were. I'd like to be reminded.
We do have that document, and we will share that with you and the consultants.
Okay.
Sandy?
So I would be open to Amy's suggestion, but lean more towards Peggy's suggestion in that perhaps we can condense these and more generalize the questions. However, it seems important that we have enough specificity so that the consultant understands the scope and, for example, public input. They were asking for a proposal on, I think, how they would lay this out, and specifically what we want to get from them. I know I'm talking in circles, but having not done a strategic plan or an RFP, I kind of defer to those who have worked on that before. But I'd be open to either striking, condensing, or leaving. So I'm completely open.
Thank you. Mike, and then you, Marilyn.
Right. Yeah, I think for a request for proposal, what we're trying to learn is their qualifications. Do we think we'll get along? Do we think they'll put the effort in, that they've got talented people, that they're going to address all the things that we need to know as a sort of a board that will help us guide the conservation, the land bank forward in the next 5 to 10 years? I'm not sure it's necessary to put in the questions that we're going to ask them ultimately to answer. I believe that will happen in the initial introductory phases of the project. The only value to them is providing some guidance and direction about what we want to hear from them. This is pretty specific. And it sounds, I can hear it from the other commissioners, that it sounds a little bit more directive than I think we anticipated. We don't want to tell them this is all the questions we need answered. I think we want to give them some guidance as to why we're doing this and what we hope to learn from it, but maybe not as specific as including these questions. So I would agree with modifying this down to some more general comments that would keep them directed in the area that we want, and ultimately we'll answer these questions, whether they're in the proposal or not.
Thank you. Marilyn?
Well, I won't take much time because it sounds like we're all in agreement that a more general scope would perhaps be more appropriate. It also opens the door for the outsider's view into the organization, which maybe bring things that we aren't clear on. So I think we all are pretty much on the same page as thanks.
Okay, so we've gone one time around, and let me just check a few things here. Mike, is your hand still up from before or again? You're muted. No, okay, your hand's down. Looks like Sandy has another question. So it does sound like we're kind of in consensus on reducing, if not eliminating, these questions. But I'm just going to go around one more time. People have so they have an opportunity. Sandy, you have another comment or question?
Yes, it's one area that I do think we should be specific, and it's very vague in here, is we're asking for a plan for the next 5 or 10 years. I feel like we need to say, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 12 years? We should be determining our length of time instead of just leaving it that broad. And maybe that's something that we do in the introductory phase as well. If so, just wanted to point that out, that it's a big range.
Mm-hmm. Okay, everybody's percolating. Brian, this is a significant shift from what the work group was doing. I'm wondering what your if you have a comment at this point.
Yeah, all I can say is that I don't agree. I think that we want to be as specific as possible in our intentions. The consultants can amplify on that. They can change the direction, but as somebody who has interviewed a lot of consultants, I'm going to look for specificity from them, and I think that they need something to base it on. I think that we need to give consultants direction and expect to get specific answers back to our questions. So to me, the RFP involves some soul searching, and the questions that we've put out as a committee, I think, are questions that we have asked, some of them for years past, in terms at our annual retreats, in terms of land bank activities and things that all of us have been concerned about as commissioners. So I guess that's my best argument for being specific in the RFP. Doesn't mean that the consultants can't address it differently or go beyond that, but I think that we should give them something specific to respond to.
Thank you. Okay, so this is fun. I guess what we need to decide, it sounds like to me, and we can have an official action vote if we want, but to move forward, I guess I would like some clarification for Lincoln. Are we, is the consensus that we fully eliminate that list of questions and just condense the document down to where it starts with, does the organizational overview and then moves directly into project overview, or do people think that we should do some more global general statement? Amy.
Yeah, thanks everybody. So I would propose that we take the 9 questions, make them much more general for purposes of this RFP, because I think the project overview talks about having a visioning process. And so I think when we get to that visioning process, you know, these are good questions to ask. I'd even volunteer over the weekend to help rewrite this. But I would be interested in putting forward a motion that approves this with the revision of the questions to a much more general level, to the you know, effect that some of the issues we hope to address in the strategic planning effort would include questions over the prioritization of stewardship over, you know, just take these and, again, like I had originally said, sort of raise it 10,000 feet. So again, I would be interested in putting forward a motion, and then I will volunteer to help do that expeditiously. But my hope is that we could basically get approval of this today, that we could trust that Lincoln and me and Krista or whomever could sort of work this out with the trust of the commission to just get this out the door next week. So I would be happy to make a motion to that effect. Thank you.
I think you should go ahead and make that motion to that effect, since you still have the mic.
Okay, well, I will make a motion. So I would propose that the commission move forward with the RFP with the modification that the 9 questions will be revised to a more general description of the types of questions that we will want to ask as part of the visioning and strategic planning process. And that the commission defer the revision of that to staff and or commissioners who volunteer, so that it does not need further approval and can get out the door next week. Thank you.
So Tanya, you'll have to take the actual verbiage from that from the recording. We won't ask to be repeated. Do I have a second on that motion? Marilyn seconds. Okay, so we'll have a little more discussion about how everybody's feeling about turning this over to a smaller group to keep the process going. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I think I approve. I will vote for the motion. I just want to make sure that I respect Brian's input regarding the need for the consultant to really understand what it is we're after. And I'm hoping that Amy and Krista and Lincoln can put that together in such a way that it's a little bit less, that it has a slightly different flavor, but that it still includes enough information for the consultant to know the direction we anticipate. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sandy?
I just wanted to say I'd be curious to hear what Lincoln has to say about this.
Yeah, he's on my list. But go ahead, Lincoln.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with revising the questions and making them more general. I think that's, they're meant as an example anyway. So backing it out and making it more general is fine.
Amy,
Yeah,
did you have any
Mike.
comments? Oh, sorry.
Oops,
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry. Okay, I would tend to agree as long as what Amy and team are going to do gives the people who are completing the proposal clarity around what we're expecting out of it, out of the work, because I don't want them heading in a direction that doesn't give us the answers to the questions we really need to answer. And remember, this is separate from the REIT, but it is addressing how we're doing and how we're going to do in light of the changing environment from 10 years ago. And it will influence the folks working on the REIT. But so it needs to be able to answer some of the questions the public might have about what we're doing and the input they want to have on what we should be doing. And I think it's become increasingly important as this year goes on and next year goes on, as dependent on real estate sales and how much resources we have and where we should spend those resources. And that's why I was in favor of some details in the proposal request. But if we could do that otherwise, I'm in favor of that, and I can see some value in it.
Thank you. Peggy?
So I'm in favor of what Amy's proposed. I think that it's really important, as I said before, to really kind of maybe simplify, what we're asking them to do. And one way to do that would be to kind of more generalize, like, focus on stewardship, on acquisition priorities. And then kind of there's the question of non-traditional partnerships. And are there ways that we want to expand that? And then, we can have these questions, we can bring them back in again after we've selected people based on their expertise and what they've done in the past. So I don't think by not including really specific questions that we're ruling out the opportunity to bring those back in. So I think that's an important piece. I think what Sandy brought up, the question of 5 or 10 years, I think that's really important to clarify. So, and personally, I think, the 10 years would be appropriate, but I'm open to 5, but I think it needs to be clarified. So I guess, so yeah, I'm in favor, and I thanks for those of you who are willing to step up and do the work this weekend.
Brian, I don't know if I've asked you to comment since the motion was made.
Well, I think I've commented. I would, are we voting, Krista?
Well, we will, yeah. This is the discussion. After you make the motion in the second, you have a discussion.
No, I have no further comment.
Okay. My only comment is I would agree with the motion as made, with just a technical question, because there are some typos or a few corrections, edits that I think need to be made, and can I assume that those can be made as, not significant to the document outside of this motion? Okay, so we had a motion, a second discussion, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as stated by Amy, which I cannot fully articulate exactly, but the gist of it we know, accepting this document with edits being made to those first questions. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Sandy?
Aye.
Sandy? Okay. Those opposed?
No.
Yeah. No? Any abstains? Brian?
And Krista, I just want to say I'm personally opposed to the motion, but to the what seems to be the consensus of folks taking it back and reworking the proposal independent of the commission, I would vote yes for that. I'm fine.
Okay, so Sandy, you're voting yes, I assume, because I need to do the vote and then we can talk. Discussion's over. All right, so
can I just clarify? Yes, I'm voting yes. However,
no, yeah, I think you have to vote on the motion. I'm not sure. You can bring your however back once we do the vote. Because we can't change the motion as it stands. So we have, I believe there's 7 commissioners. We have 6 in favor, 1 against. So the motion carries. Sandy, your however?
My however was that we need to address the length of time. Either we need to address the length of time that the strategic plan that we're asking for it to cover, or we need to be general in that and just call it a strategic plan. And I would propose, I don't know if this is too long, but I would propose that we're looking for a strategic plan through 2038, which would be 12 years. It would be the period of time in which we're asking that if the REIT is reauthorized, it would be guiding us through to the next authorization. And
okay, so I think we can have some discussion about this because there is a range that's created in the document itself, and we're going to pinpoint it. I don't think that's a major, although it's an important topic. So I'm curious for the rest of the commissioners, a 12-year period for a strategic plan. Are you feeling that that's appropriate? I guess the assumption is that this document is visited every year. So it's not like we are holding things in concrete for 12 years, but and there are other people on this commission now with more experience with strategic planning than I have in terms of appropriate length. So I would like to get people's input on that. So I will start with Brian. You're my go-to.
I don't know that I really have a comment on that, Krista. Probably the shorter is better, but I don't know. I don't really have an opinion.
Okay, I'll come back around. Marilyn.
I'm a little concerned at how much projection the consultant would be required to make for a 12-year period, since the world is changing so quickly. I'm not opposed to it necessarily, but I think we have to recognize that the future would be dimmer the further out we go. And we may be paying for something that's not really, it's not going to be useful. I'm also interested in decoupling the REIT renewal from the strategic planning process, if at all possible. That's all. Thanks.
Amy.
Oh, hi. I agree with Marilyn. I think 12 years might be a little long, even though this is meant to be a living document. So in part, I kind of think, so 5 years bridges us to the other side of the REIT renewal. 10 years, that's kind of a big scope. I kind of feel like, maybe 5 to 7 is a little more the ideal range, but I'm open to being moved on that. Thanks.
Mike?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. If it wasn't so weird, I'd say 7 or 8 years would be the scale that I'm interested in. It gives us enough time to move on these longer term recommendations and see what kind of results they have. And yet it's not so long as to be out of sight, out of mind. And so, 5 to 7, it would be fine with me. The 5 seems short.
Mhm.
7 seems right. 10 seems long.
Peggy?
I think it's really important that I'm agreeing. I think to go all the way out to the end of the next renewal, I think that's too far out. One of my main considerations is public input and what are we going to learn from the reauthorization. So being able to incorporate that into the plan, I think is really important. So I don't know. I don't have a specific like 5, 7 years, 8 years, whatever, but 5 seems too short. And so something out there a little bit more.
Okay, so I would agree. I think 5 to 7 is the range I would be more comfortable with than 12. And that sounds like we have a consensus on that. Can we make that edit in this document? That would be great. Okay, so I think we have a document. So Lincoln, I guess I need to know from you, or you and I and Amy and anyone else. I mean, I don't want to take away from the working group that has been present, but I do want to take Amy up on her offer to help generalize some of this focus. So should we do that? We could do it over the weekend. We could do it Monday. What's
Krista, I will, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Krista, I will, by Sunday evening, have a written proposal to you and Lincoln and whomever else you want to share it with is fine. But I'll do the first volley, taking into consideration all the really good and thoughtful comments from the rest of the commissioners on this, and do my best effort to get you a solid draft. So by Sunday evening.
Thank you. That would be great. Brian.
Yeah, Krista, I'd like to go back to the comment that I was going to make about a half an hour ago, which was about the role or the degree of public outreach and participation in the strategic plan. And you triggered this thought by a comment that you made some time ago about measurable public input, which triggered in me the thought that of a comment that Lincoln made a couple of times during our strategic planning process about the need for a measurable, statistically valid survey to be done prior to the renewal. It seems to me that we have had a lot of non-statistically valid public input over the last several years. We've had, I think we're going on our 3rd round of community conversations. We've had a Polis quote unquote survey, and a number of other opportunities for public input. And we hear pretty much the same things from people who are not regular participants at land bank meetings, and I think most of them don't touch the concerns that we have raised in the questions that we raised in the original draft. So this goes also to decoupling the strategic planning process with from the renewal, which Marilyn brought up, and I agree with that completely. It seems to me that two things. The most valid public input in the strategic planning are what Mike suggested, and that is talking with opinion leaders in the community, perhaps other agencies in the county, and certainly the nonprofits, the Preservation Trust, and so on. Very focused, very limited. And then again, to Lincoln's suggestion, a statistically valid survey, which I think would come at the end of the strategic planning process and really be part of the renewal. Other than that, I think having a bunch of kind of generalized public meetings about the strategic plan is frankly a waste of time and money.
Thank you for that vague and undirected opinion, Brian.
Anytime.
So I appreciate your comments, and what I will say is I think the direction and discussion on communication will come during the early stages of the strategic planning process. So all those comments that you've made now, I think we need to bring back when we start working with a consultant on how we hope to engage the community in a way that will give us, valid information. So not for today, but duly noted, and we'll bring it back when we engage that consultant. But thank you for that.
Chris, this is Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, real quick. As I think about this, maybe we need to include a little bit more about our communication strategy, and with the consultants. And this is sort of like, once you tell us, or once we all agree on what our strategic direction should be and some of the tactics involved, how do we get that word across to our constituents, which are 15,000 people that live in the county? What are the things we've been doing, things we haven't been doing? Because I tend to agree with Brian. I've only been here a year, but I'm not so sure that many people really know that much about us and about what we're doing and about why it's important. And this is the thing that worries me most. It crosses over into the REIT, but it's basically, how do we get the word out to people who matter and care and are about the ecology and on what we're doing and why this is important. And I don't know if we need a separate group within, we can do that if we have the talent, but we do need, I think, a really good communication strategy about how are we best using our time and resources to let people know, get them comfortable with what we're doing and why it's important. So that's, it may be a separate thing, Krista, than this. Or maybe we may be able to do it out of this, but that's one of my biggest concern is communication and a strategy and being effective in building a cadre of folks who care about what we do.
I would propose that in our interviews with the consultants that we are interested in learning more from, that would be something that we would be asking them. If faced with this challenge, what would be your strategy? We, as an organization, we have done a lot of work for outreach and whatnot, but I don't, and I say this with all due respect, we don't really have an effective strategy. So I don't feel equipped to promote one to a consultant. And I would be interested in knowing what that consultant's or that organization, that firm, what their strategy might be for given a community like this and what the challenges are. So if that's what I think, again, I think communication is important. It's going to come back, and I think as part of the plan, but it can surely come back as part of the interview process with the consultants to find out what is their experience and what would they be doing to help us with that. Does anybody else have any comment about that? Sandy?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sandy.
Yes, a strategic communications plan or a communications plan we have talked about that. I know I've brought it up several times going back, and we need that. We just discussed it in the communications work group. I guess that would, the update would be later in this meeting. But we did just recently discuss the need for that. I just wanted to mention that to Mike, and I had volunteered to work with Tanya to document everything that we're doing now in an outline form so that a consultant could use that as a springboard to helping us formulate a comprehensive plan on communications, whether it's integrated into strategic plan, it's probably a standalone document.
Okay, so the purpose of this right now was to approve this RFP so that we can move forward. Brian, is your hand raised for another comment or?
Yes, it is. I just wanted to say that I agree completely with what Mike said and also with you, Krista. The communications plan was something that we discussed several times during our meetings. And I think it's an essential part of the strategic plan and going forward into the REIT. So yes, I think it's a central part and should be included.
Thank you.
Yeah, so again, this is me real quickly. Is it the commissioner's perspective that this proposal makes it clear that we want tactics as well as strategy? You know, for example, tactics are more short term. They're, you know, basically, here's your strategy, here's the critical success factors that you need to do to achieve your strategy, and here's what you need to do in the next few years, of which one would be develop an effective communication plan. Is this something that the commissioners think this consultant should be able to deliver to us as tactics alongside the strategy?
I guess I would have made that assumption that they would, but we asked them in the document for an approved strategy for public engagement. Yeah, tactic strategy. I don't even know how to comment on that right now. Brian, anybody else to comment to Mike? Do we need to, I guess you're asking if we need to just include the words tactic in the document to clarify what we're expecting from them?
Well, I think that's the question is this what we expect out of the strategic plan? Is not just a strategy, but also, you know, out of that strategy, here are the important things you need to do to achieve those things. And that would be what I would call tactics. There may be more short term than 7 years or whatever we decide on, but they're clearly something that Lincoln and his team could take and say, this is what we've got to do to achieve our mission, our direction. And one of those clearly would be communication. And that's why I was wondering whether it should be called out in here among other things or just in general. But as long as I know that that's what the board expects, is they expect tactics, they expect a roadmap as to how to get there, then I'm okay. I'll be interested to see what the folks come back with.
I'll just make one comment and then turn it to Brian. And so I guess my feeling is the strategy to me is important, but I'm not convinced yet that whoever we're engaging for the strategic plan is going to be the same person if we just, or firm that we decide we want to develop a communication plan. They may or may not be the firm to do that. So I guess that's my discomfort on getting too specific on what we're expecting from them, because communication could be part of a strategic plan, but the specificity that we might eventually come to there might be someone better to take that ball and move it forward.
And I'm not saying it has to be the same. I'm just saying that what do you want out of this proposal? Do you want people to come back with a roadmap on how to achieve the strategy? We may need to hire other consultants for various parts of it, like communication. It doesn't limit that. Don't tell us exactly what should be in the communication plan. Just tell us that we've got to develop an effective one.
I'm comfortable leaving it as written with approved strategy for public engagement. If everybody else is, then I think we can move forward with the motion that was made and voted on, and we can proceed to stewardship.
Lincoln had his hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lincoln, I don't see you.
That's all right. I can't remember that you can't see me because I'm posing as Aaron.
Oh, that's right.
So,
You're Aaron.
What I was going to say is that there is a section in here at the top of page 4 which talks about critical success factors and identifying tasks under each strategy. So I think it's meant to be included in the plan to answer Mike's question. I guess my question is whether that needs to be made more explicit or is that adequate?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Mike thinks it's adequate. I might want to underline it or something just to make sure they see that and it's clear. But yeah, I think that's the specificity we should be asking for. That's fine.
Great. All right. Well, so good work on that, you guys. When I saw 9:10 to 9:40, I thought, wow, that'll be something if we can get this talked about in 30 minutes. So it took a little longer, and that's great. And many thanks to Amy for taking on that first draft at the revision of that section. I'm very grateful for that. Always easier to edit than to draft up. So I'm going to propose right now, it's 9:56 and we're scheduled to have a break in another 10 minutes or so, but I would suggest we do it now and then just work into the whole stewardship section if everybody is comfortable with that.
Yeah, we are, Krista, we are going to condense stewardship a little bit because the wetland mitigation policy, I don't think we're really ready to talk about. So
okay.
probably pull that off, but yeah.
Okay, so let's take a break. It's, let's say 10:05. That gives you 9 minutes. We'll come back then. Thanks, everybody. Okay, hello, hello. Are we all back on? Looks like it.
I'm here. This is Amy. I'm probably going to stay off camera though. But I'm here.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, thanks, thanks. Okay, so we are now back to the agenda and the stewardship section. I'll turn that over to Lincoln.
Great. So Doug is going to take it from here to talk about the False Bay Creek Preserve. As you remember, we got a letter from the Clean Water Advisory Group about management of that preserve. We thought it was important to give you all some of the background of what's happened there as we move forward. We do have a staff recommendation, but I'm going to let Doug just take you through, just fill you in on a lot of the details of what's happened out there.
Yeah, thank you, Lincoln, and thanks for this opportunity. I want to just also point out that while I'm kind of giving this presentation, that Charlie Binky and Lincoln have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this. And Eliza also has a great deal of history with this property, and kind of hope she might be able to weigh in later on as well. I'm going to share my screen here. It's always a mystery to know what you guys are seeing. Get started. There we go. All right, so there's a bunch of photos through this presentation that were by Chris Tarrant, their aerial photographs that provide some really great perspectives. So right here, what we're looking at is False Bay at the bottom, the False Bay Creek Preserve in the middle, and you can see Zylstra in the upper left there. Point out real quickly, False Bay Creek is kind of the main stem that travels up to Zylstra. And you can make out that there is another stream that kind of heads off to the right, and that's referred to as San Juan Creek. So as Lincoln mentioned in that last meeting, there was discussion about the letter we received from the Clean Water Advisory Committee, or CWAC. And that request was to, on the cessation of grazing on the preserve, primarily due to concerns regarding the impacts of that on water quality. And I really want to take a start at this by acknowledging the really great work that CWAC does, and that we have a lot of respect and appreciation for that. There was some tension and some miscommunication, I think, regarding our intent, but I really do believe that we are well aligned with our goals. So this purpose of this presentation is to provide some more background on the history of the site, including the land bank's reason for the acquisition, the management of the preserve over time that supports our staff recommendation for the short-term management here. So I'm just going to move forward. So although there's an obvious focus of this preserve as being part of this larger kind of fluvial system, so it's critical that we should be considering it in that context. False Bay Creek is a sub-basin within the larger False Bay watershed. And I want to point out that historically, there are very few fresh water bodies in the San Juan Islands. On San Juan, there was perhaps only 4 or 5 freshwater lakes, but numerous wetlands. Today, there's an abundance of reservoirs and a growing number of ponds. And this includes Trout Lake, kind of the big heavy hitter that's the town's water supply that may be expanding here in coming years. Additionally, Lawson Pond, Margot Lake, Lake Edna, Zylstra Lake and Lower Zylstra, Emerling Lake, and Rainbow Lake, just to name a few within this system. On the outset, you might think that increasing surface water retention is a way to conserve water, but it also has contributed to these major alterations into the hydrology of the whole watershed. These impoundments and diversions, together with ditching, draining, and development, has resulted in earlier onset of stream flow, more frequent intense floods, and an earlier cessation of flows as we get into spring and summertime. So a little bit about the history that's kind of important and relevant here. Records going back to the 1850s mostly indicate that False Bay Creek and San Juan Creek flows were seasonal in nature. Pre-colonial conditions are always difficult to discern with really good accuracy, and it's likely that indigenous land stewardship had a big influence on these conditions. Also, the presence of beavers in the watershed would have had major implications on hydrology. The historic notes do point to that the low part of the valley lacked a distinct stream channel and probably had more of kind of a shrub and tree dominated wetland type habitat. The comparative photos that you see here do show changes over time. In that historic photo, I want you to note that there is the lack of a distinct stream channel through the lower part of the valley and the preserve. While in the contemporary image, forest has become established along with hedgerows along fence lines, and you see the establishment of some riparian vegetation. So San Juan Valley was among the earliest areas homesteaded in the San Juans, largely due to a large extent of existing open grassland, good quality soils, and those water resources. While survey notes indicate that the bulk of the preserve was not converted for agricultural use in 1874, it's clearly in agricultural use, a little over 20 years later, 1897. In this map, you see the western half of the preserve is in cultivation, while the east side is in pasture or hay. That fence line that runs up the middle, that remains evident to this day, as you'll see in later images. So the segment of False Bay Creek immediately north of the preserve is also ditched. Ditching was expanded over time, in particular with the formation of San Juan County Drainage District No. 1 in 1922, which formalized construction and maintenance throughout the valley, and remnants of these activities persist to this day. Basic understanding of the history of agriculture is also important to the conversation about current and future trajectory of grazing in the valley. Prior to World War II, agriculture in the county was much more diversified, and then regional and global changes led to a decline in that diversification of agriculture and a shift to less intense activities, and especially kind of defaulting to beef, cattle, and hay. This change is evident in the chart from Boyd Pratt's book that shows the rapid abandonment of high-intensity management of dairy cattle in favor of beef starting in the 1950s. Although they were large in number, the dairy cattle were really primarily dispersed over the larger landscape on these smaller diverse farms rather than the large herds that we see today. Ditching and drainage was continued as these activities increased available grazing land. When our lessee, John Wilson, began grazing this property in the 1960s, he recalls the ditch just north of the preserve having been being maintained so deep that it was impossible for someone to climb out if an unlucky person found themselves in the bottom. Beginning in the 1980s, kind of island-wide, there's been a trend towards small-scale market gardens and specialty farms that have been replacing grazing and hay production. In the last 10 years, grazing in most of the former pasture lands in the Upper False Bay watershed has ceased. Portions of these lands have transitioned to agricultural operations that were smaller in nature, while others have simply gone fallow or have been converted for residential development. Within San Juan Valley, many of the farmers who were part of this shift from hay to a hay and grazing regime are now reaching retirement age, and it's unclear what the future holds for some of these larger lands. So the land bank acquired False Bay Creek Preserve in 2008. And the comparative map here kind of showed change in land cover over time. And what I want you to note is the establishment of the riparian vegetation that follows that acquisition. The property was already encumbered with a preservation trust conservation easement, but the commission saw opportunity to make changes in land management for these environmental benefits, with a major goal, stated goal of that acquisition was the potential for salmon habitat restoration. Subsequent assessments have created some uncertainties regarding current and future suitability for salmonids in this system, though there is this potential that there is the remnant of a coastal cutthroat trout population. In 2006, prior to our acquisition, the property was subject to a wetland enforcement action by the Department of Ecology, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Army Corps. And that followed from when the farmers basically had followed this traditional practice of cleaning out the ditch, or which created this new deeper stream channel. So immediately following our acquisition, we initiated consultation with all these enforcement agencies, and we immediately implemented these mitigation actions. In 2011, we received formal notification of successful completion of those requirements. And then we went through kind of our typical assessment period, working with partners like Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Conservation District, the San Juan Preservation Trust, and others on the development of a management plan, which was approved in 2013. At this point in time, there was a sense that grazing would not be incompatible, but that may need to be revisited in the future. This influenced the ongoing decision to maintain short-term use agreements rather than committing to a long-term lease of the preserve. While a change in management did not seem unlikely, the inflection point for this management change was unclear. Over time, this decision became increasingly linked with the potential retirement of our lessee. The request that we received from CWAC is helpful in reinitiating this conversation. I want to highlight some of the effort that has gone into improving water quality and riparian habitat, including collaborations with the San Juan Conservation District for funding and technical support, funding and project management by San Juan County Environmental Resources, and assistance from multiples of groups and volunteers, including the Island Conservation Corps, Washington Conservation Corps, Northwest Youth Corps, Spring Street International School, and others. I really want to also highlight that through these improvements that we were the first, and in some case remain the only property, the only in San Juan Valley that fenced out livestock from the creek and riparian zone, that began restoration of those riparian zones. We were the first to develop stock water system that separated the animals from surface water sources. We were the first to establish stocking rates. We were first to establish a rotational grazing scheme. And we're the first to impose seasonal grazing restrictions where animals are removed from the property during the wet part of the year. Despite all of these efforts to improve water quality and facilitate continued agricultural use, there is a sense that these measures have been insufficient. Over the last few years, we've experienced a pattern of pronounced, even record winter flooding, along with protracted summer drought. And this has contributed to unfavorable conditions. But on the flip side, that's also giving us this potential window into future climate conditions and the changing conditions on the preserve. The ditch has been gradually filling with sediment, contributing to the property becoming more saturated. It's worth mentioning that the flood conditions on the preserve are probably also exacerbated by the built environment. We mentioned earlier in the presentation about the increase in storm flow, but on the preserve itself, we have a 2017 memo produced by Northwest Hydraulic Consultants that was done for the Conservation District, which suggests that flooding might be increased by insufficient culvert size, damming caused by Baylor Hill Road, and probably most significant, what's kind of considered an unknown downstream impediment to flow in the stream. So it's important to understand the context of the preserve management within the active framework of adjacent lands in San Juan Valley. Most streams within the valley grazing areas are not fenced from animal access, and there are few restrictions on any sort of seasonal access. The map here shows is a rough estimate of the current grazing management with regard to the fencing of primary and secondary streams. Unfenced or incomplete fence sections are in red, fenced sections are in green. Light blue lines are properties that we understand do not currently have grazing. This is important in considering the impact of the immediate cessation of grazing on the preserve where fencing and management restrictions are in place. Removal or adjustment to grazing, while likely to have some long-term benefit, is not expected to have an immediate significant impact due to the ongoing conditions of the surrounding properties and really our efforts to improve the conditions. So I just want to give a couple examples of these unfenced areas, what they look like during that late winter, early spring. So this portion here on the left is a portion that has been fenced just in this last year. But you can see here there's a much higher stocking rate than we experienced, and cattle are having direct access into the wetlands and stream corridors all winter long. Adjacent here as well is another site where all of those little dots are cattle right in the wetlands that are part of this San Juan Creek stream system. So although the last 2 years were abnormal conditions, both in terms of record precipitation and flooding and dryness, it's clear that these water quality concerns remain. In collaboration with the University of Washington Conservation District, Environmental Stewardships, CWAC, and others, water quality testing has been taking place over the last 2 years. These pink stars that you see show locations within the preserve where water quality monitoring has been taking place as water enters through those streams and where it's exiting at Baylor Hill Road. Preliminary data does not suggest a significant increase in nutrients between these 2 points, but we've also been told there's questions about whether the sampling is sensitive enough to be able to detect relative change. So our current grazing management looks something like this. We permit grazing from mid-April typically through September. The entry date is really dependent on how wet the conditions are in that sort of middle to late spring. The stocking rate has been limited to 20 head. The pond in that north pasture was improved, fenced from access from the animals, and a solar pump installed. The storage tank and underground water lines were installed to feed troughs that are in each of those 3 pastures. Cattle are initially put in that east pasture, rotated to the north, and eventually to that wetter west pasture. No grazing in the wet pasture occurs after August. That's basically to give time for any of those cow pies and manure to be able to break down. A little bit of background on our lessee is also very relevant to this conversation. John is a 6th generation islander, and he's been grazing on this property for more than 50 years. He's been receptive and responsive to our requests, even when questioning their rationale. Pretty amazing that he worked in the pea and hay fields as well, sort of in that prior transition of the whole valley into more of this hay and grazing regime. So within the greater watershed, I want to just try and place us where we are in time with this preserve and agriculture and environmental concerns in general. Major changes have already taken place in the upper watershed, and there's indications that this has significantly improved water quality. A large percentage of current farmers running livestock in the lower watershed surrounding this preserve are nearing retirement. Small improvements, such as the great work that's being taken place with the Preservation Trust, the Conservation District, and Environmental Resources in fencing and restoring riparian areas, will continue in the near term, and further restoration activities at Zylstra and elsewhere will continue to improve habitat and water quality. Climate change impacts and development continue to be major threats, and bringing both ongoing and novel impacts, but overall we're seeing an upward trajectory. So just to kind of conclude here, False Bay watershed is a highly complex and altered system. A return to historic conditions is an unreasonable goal, but stabilization and improvement is well within the collective capacity of everyone working in this area. False Bay Creek Preserve is just a small but very important part of that whole picture. We've been applying adaptive management practices with technical support from a number of organizations. While we believe we have made large strides in improving habitat and water quality, we are listening to the feedback that these practices may be insufficient and recognize it's time to explore alternatives. Although John Wilson's 2-year use agreement had technically expired, the reality is we've been rolling this agreement forward, and he has relied on this property to support his farming operation for decades. We offered a longer-term rental option on different properties, which he politely declined. He stated a strong preference for just 1 more year here, 1 season on the preserve, over the long-term agreement on some other property. As a good faith and to demonstrate our commitments to supporting agriculture, habitat, and improving water quality, we strongly recommend phasing out of the current grazing model at the end of 2023. Allowing a season of transition will enable a lessee to make to make the necessary adjustments to his operation. And it's a respectful treatment of someone with a long history on this land and who's been a responsible and responsive lessee. Charlie has been discussing potential details of a transition with him, which would include additional management measures to try and reduce the short-term impacts. Together, we will more tightly control the timing and intensity of grazing in the wet areas of the property. He's volunteering to reduce the stocking rate, and we will seek ways to remove or mulch manure from those wet areas of the property at the end of the season. Looking forward, we will seek to initiate a management plan next year. We recognize that False Bay Creek Preserve is this small part of a much larger system that is in transition. The preserve must be considered in this context of this larger landscape. With this in mind, we believe there's a clear need to facilitate stakeholder involvement in these deliberations and decision makings on this preserve and planning within the greater watershed. This should include all of the relevant local government departments and boards, state agencies, conservation district, and other vested non-government organizations and private landowners. As management conditions change within the watershed, we also believe there is a need for ongoing collection of water quality data to better understand the results and inform decision making. So I'm going to leave it there, and just I think we'll open up for some discussion.
Great. Great job, Doug. That is a lot of information. Love it. So, commissioners, are there questions? Who would like to start with questions for Doug? Mike? Oh,
Yes.
Mike, sorry,
Yeah.
that was, sorry. Looks like Sandy, you have your hand up.
Yes. So is the bottom line recommendation from staff to allow one more year of grazing with this lessee, with these changes that have been worked out in terms of reduced stocking, and is that the bottom line staff recommendation? One more
That's
year and
that's
then develop a new management plan?
correct. Yeah, we're I think both in terms of the time frame that we try to work within for our management plans, we're at that level, that place, and then certainly just within recognizing that where this property is and where kind of the rest of the valley is, it's an appropriate time to kind of open this up for greater discussion. And this will also feed right into the management concerns and plans we need to be addressing for Zylstra Lake.
Thank you. And thank you very much for providing so much information so we have context.
Oh, so is it Marilyn that's got her hand up, or Mike?
I've got
Is that Mike? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Who are we talking about? Did you call me, Krista?
You're breaking up. I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else can.
This is Mike. Can you hear me?
Just marginally.
We'll have to figure this.
Yeah, we cannot hear you, but I will come back to you. Any other questions from any commissioners?
Peggy's got her hand.
Yeah. Doug, thanks for this overview and the historical perspective, and I think these aerial photos are great. I haven't seen this property for a long time, but I'm pretty sure I know which one it is. And I guess there was also, I just want to make mention of the letter that we had from the ARC with their thoughts on that. And I thought that was a very well-written letter and recommendation. And my main issue is that I think the land bank has done, and this is all kind of, I have not gone out there yet. So I just understand that there's been a lot of restoration work, but I think the land bank really has done a lot of really good restoration work on trying to improve the riparian and fence it and keep the cattle out and do the kind of rotational grazing based on the seasons and limiting the number of cattle out there. I would question whether 20 cattle in that small of an acreage is appropriate. I mean, that still seems like a lot of animals. But my main question is all the upstream uses over which we really don't have any control of at this point. I know there's the work that's been done. I think, is that the Sunstrom property that's on the corner of San Juan Valley Road? And is that right? So I think there's been quite a bit of work done there. Is that correct?
There's been some, yeah. They fenced out one wetland. Cattle still seem to find their way in there periodically. And part of the stream as it goes through that property has been fenced as well.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the Red Mill Farm, which is owned by the Preservation Trust. And I know that the current farmer there will continue to farm until he chooses to not do that. But at that point, that will open up great opportunity for doing some restoration work if the Preservation Trust is interested in that. So I guess my interest and is in trying to figure out ways to find a win-win. And I think maybe that's what you've been trying to do. But how can we continue some type of agriculture out there and really protect the water quality in the downstream areas? So I have more questions, and this is kind of a vague response because I haven't been out there for a while, but it seems like there's been some good efforts in that regard. So I'm not sure why we would say no more grazing out there.
Yeah, I guess the CWAC committee, again, have the utmost respect for. We've got some people with really phenomenal technical expertise, and they've been looking at this system as a whole. And I think that they feel, that given the shape and form of this property, that they're really, at least that western part, that there is no really good way to graze that continually. And there's a strong feeling of trying to get that moved towards restoration. The potential of, deliberations between different types of restoration that could happen, and agriculture, or looking at things that kind of combine those two, it's super complex. And both of those things, they fit right in with our mandate. And while we could certainly treat this property as an isolated, small little 40-acre parcel, as I was mentioning, I think really that it would benefit the entire system if we were able to partner with adjacent landowners, upstream, downstream, and have a little bit broader vision for what we're trying to accomplish. It's been voiced to me from environmental resources that they see agriculture continuing in the valley and want to see that happening, but also want to really make sure that we're doing what we can to protect these resources. So since water quality data that we have, it doesn't show this massive contribution from this property, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a contribution happening. And to some degree, I think we just need to really recognize that, as we did from the beginning of the acquisition on this property, that this was a potential, and that these were kind of our major goals for the property going forward. But I do agree that we do need to consider agriculture and figure out how that might be able to work in some sort of fashion going forward. That's too much for us to take on today. That really is part of that, development of a management plan process that will take us into sort of the next phase of the property. I really welcome Charlie to jump in here, or Liza at any point, or Lincoln as well. So.
Yeah, sure. I'll take the mic. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm a bit under the weather, so excuse me here in the shadows. Yeah, just to add on to what Doug was just saying, I totally agree that this conversation, or that question and discussion, is really where that management planning process will go. The letter from the ARC, I think, highlights that need to really engage with the stakeholders and consider grazing as a potential for the property as a tool. I think this recommendation to allow one more year makes total sense with all the considerations, just a more graceful transition for current management while trying to improve it this year. And then, yeah, really looking at what the potential is on the property.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to try again?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Doug, great job. I've been looking for someone to help explain this whole valley water issue and I've gotten a lot of input, but yours was very factual. I really think that's great. I think we should jump on a 1-year renewal and this has been kind of a year-to-year thing, and I think we ought to let him know that there's going to be an end to this. He's amenable to it, which is good. It does take a little while to transition cattle. They live for 2 or 3 years before they're processed, and he needs time to do that. And I think we can provide him. I don't think 1 year is going to make any difference to the water quality long-term. And I think the long-term water quality issues have to be resolved by the neighbors and us and everybody else involved. It's a big valley and lots of people are contributing to it. So I say great job, Doug. And if there needs to be a motion, I make the motion that we approve a 1-year lease for John.
Lincoln, do we need a formal motion? Can we work just with consensus of the commission? What would be the most helpful to you?
I think we can work off of consensus.
Okay. So I want everyone to have their chance. If they have questions or pertinent comments to this, I'm just watching our time. We're at 10:36, which gives us about a half an hour to wrap up the rest of the agenda. So can I ask for, yeah, thank you, Doug. If I could open up the screen. So if I could get an idea from the commissioners, if you are supportive of that by a raise of hands, and hopefully I can see all your hands. You'll just have to tell me whether they're up there. So Amy's up, and Brian, are you there? Brian, supportive? Questions? Supportive, great. Okay, good. Sandy, good. Okay. Marilyn, thank you. I think I got everybody. All right. Well, that sounds, the consensus sounds like that we are supportive of the 1-year contract and the updating, moving towards the updating of the management plan and the other staff recommendations. So thank you, Doug. That was really, your presentations are always very thorough. I love that. Very grateful. Okay, so Lincoln, as you indicated, I guess we're going to take the mitigation policy off the agenda. So we're skipping that. So the next thing would be the preserve, Spencer Spit Preserve final draft of the management plan. And then the final topic under stewardship is our introductory discussion of tribal interests. So I foresee that taking some time. So if we can be succinct without offending anybody on the management plan, that would be great. It just depends. I'm not sure how long Doug wanted for this introductory primer on tribal interests. So but I know it could be a bit long. So do you just want input on the management plan? From anybody?
Yeah. I think we're looking for approval, right, Amanda?
Yeah, so we can certainly be succinct. I mean, this has come in front of you before. So this is the final draft of the management plan for Spencer Spit Preserve. It was open for public comment in the month of February, and we also had a public meeting at that time where people could give comments in person. We received very few written comments, 4 emails, and we also just talked to people at that public meeting. Generally favorable comments. There were a few concerns about public access and how that looks, kind of concerning dogs and the bluff. So for the written plan, we did not make any changes. So this is the same draft plan that you saw a month or 2 ago. And we feel like we can address the concerns about public access through implementation. And secondly, the other, a main part of this plan is to work with Washington State Parks for management. And we have worked on an interagency agreement with them, which is now signed, to assist with management of the property for the next 5 years. So now we're just asking for approval on the plan. And I'm actually not sure, Lincoln, will this come back for a public hearing approval? Is this just like kind of the?
Yeah, I think what we need is just consensus approval at this point, that the procedure for official approval of management plans is to attach them to a budget. And then for the commission to recommend that budget to council, and council has final approval. So consensus at this point would be great.
Okay, so any objection or concerns about the management plan as presented? That might be the easier route. Okay, I'm going to take Brian, question?
Yeah, thank you, Krista. It is a question. I gather from reading the plan that there is no longer any possibility for state parks taking possession of Spencer's, the rest of Spencer's Pit.
I'll jump in on that one. No, we went through an extremely long and I would say tortured process trying to make that happen. And in the end, with the seller basically making a bargain sale on one of these parcels to us and then donating the other parcel, the trade-off here is that it's under land bank control. However, through this interagency agreement, the bulk of the management activities will be carried out by Washington State Parks, which makes sense because it's not going to be a heavily used property, and the origin of any foot traffic will be coming from Spencer State Park. So it's just kind of a logical extension for them to patrol it and help us keep an eye on it.
Anybody else in question or concern? All right, I'm going to take that as consensus to go ahead and into the next steps for approval of that plan. Good job, you guys. All right, so the next thing is our introduction to the land bank and tribal interests. Doug, I presume you are on point for that, or Lincoln, are you going to start that conversation?
I think Doug's going to take this one.
It's kind of fun addressing the commission. I feel like I haven't done this in a while. It's twice in one meeting. And I would really invite Amy to participate in here as well. She has a wealth of background and was certainly leading into this. I've discussed things with her. I guess I think my memo outlined pretty well the intent of, looking at this approach to the question that the commission has been asking. And I guess I want to emphasize that my role, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a legal scholar or anything like that. I'm really not trying to push any of those elements. Really what the point of trying to ask for these different readings and was to start off this conversation, kind of give some foundation. You can probably tell from my last presentation that I do think there's a lot of value of kind of understanding that background and history in framing the conversation. And those documents that I passed on certainly are not the end all be all, but it seemed like some that might be helpful. And so this idea basically, again, would be to try and just get some sort of conversation and generative ideas going here. And then hopefully at the April meeting, have a bit of a discussion with some tribal representatives. And at this point, we have 3 people potentially lined up. Andrew Gobin from Tulalip, Sam Barr, who's a Samish tribal member and works for Stillaguamish. There's 1 or 2 potential people from Lummi, Sharon, whose last name's escaping me, who's the director of the Coast Salish Institute at Northwest Indian College is most likely the person who would be representing there. So I guess that's my first question is, does this seem like a good approach to you all? Does this seem like an interesting way of trying to kind of start to interrogate our relationship there?
Yes.
Great.
Hey, Doug. So this is Amy. That sounds good. I would like to talk with you offline maybe about your proposed list of attendees. I don't want to get into it now, but let's touch base soon. Thanks.
So I guess just opening up into the next phase would just be trying to get some reactions, and maybe we can try and be generative of either questions you have, things you learned from, if you had opportunity to do any of this, sorting through these documents, and maybe focal areas, that you'd like to look at if we were able to get a panel together.
Okay, I'm going to give people opportunity to comment. This topic could take us, we could be here for the whole day. It's so vast that I'm a little, and there's so much to learn. I'm a little reluctant to start the conversation because I know at some point I'm just going to have to pull the plug. And so I guess I'll say that ahead of time, and then I'm going to quit talking so there's more time for other people. But we do have an executive session planned. This meeting will run probably a little long, but I'm going to try to stay with the agenda timing as much as we can. So any commissioners, would you like to make a comment on the information that was sent or your reaction to anything you read?
I have a comment, Krista.
Go ahead, Peggy.
So kind of separate from this, but aligned with this, there's been discussions on Lopez about the Land Back program, which is a kind of a loosely defined national program about having to do with reparations for the indigenous people. And it has taken many, many different forms. And so I've attended a couple of those meetings. Did not attend the latest one. Sam Barr was present at the last one, and a couple people contacted me afterwards. So there are discussions going on Lopez about this issue, and it's of great interest. And a couple of comments is one of the challenges in San Juan Islands is there's so many different tribes that have historical uses out here. So it's a challenge and an opportunity. But somebody called me after the last meeting and said that they had talked about the idea of the land bank designating a % of the REIT to go towards this purpose, basically connecting opportunities for indigenous tribes to access land for cultural purposes or to own land. And that is a really long conversation. I have no idea where that would go. And so I'm just putting that out there that there are folks on Lopez who have been talking about that. And I think, there was recently a visit with the totem pole people. Journey of the Tears. So the Lumbee folks have been out here more recently as well. So there's a lot of different work going on Lopez having to do with tribal support and connection.
Great. I'm going to ask that any continuing comments now from commission don't address the topic that Peggy just brought up, because I really want to stay focused on Doug's information. So we're not, that rabbit hole is just going to sit there for a while. Does anybody else have a comment? I'll make a couple comments because I work for Extra Credit. I'm that person. And so I did watch the webinar with the Island Trust people. I appreciate all the information that came, because having just to look at the Point Elliott Treaty, it just kind of gives a little background on what people have experienced. I'll just put it that way. So I found that very helpful. I found, if you haven't watched the webinar, I would recommend you watch it, because it's an interesting discussion with 4 people about different things that are being done up in BC and Canada. but I did learn about this Indigenous protected and conserved areas, which I didn't know anything about. It kind of comes in with the topic that Peggy raised that we're not addressing. So I would just ask that we get more, if you can continue to provide us with information like this. Wayne Suttle's document, I started to read that and I actually got to quote something from it at jury duty yesterday. It came up and I went, oh, I know that. I'm reading blah, blah. So lifelong learning, but I think this topic is going to require a great length of time for us, but any educational material you can send to us to get us prepared, that would be great. Sandy? Sandy?
Yes, hold on, I had to unmute. So first, just wanted to give Doug big kudos for kicking this off and getting us started, and the resources he provided. The paper that you just mentioned, Krista, in particular, I read all the way through. It was just fantastic. I learned so much and I'm still absorbing it all. And I would suggest that maybe we need either an extended meeting when it comes time to discussing this, or a special meeting. And then I'm also, my question is, are we looking to develop a policy, or what are we, but beyond educating ourselves, what are we hoping to achieve?
Well, if I can kind of put in a couple things there really quickly, is we're not alone in, as you mentioned, there's other groups forming around these issues and whatnot, and included in this is the county itself, and really through the environmental resources. They are looking at issues and trying to sort out some county policy related to that. They're kind of just at the beginnings of work with county council and administration to do that. I've been coordinating with them, and even though they're kind of almost running in parallel to what we're suggesting, I was given encouragement to go ahead and proceed to do things with the land bank, because we are in a little bit of a unique role and position. In terms of the ultimate goals, that really is something that seems like it's going to be driven by you, the commission. And it just seems like this is a really good opportune moment if we're moving into a strategic planning period to have this as some part of that consideration.
Marilyn or Mike, anyone would like to share a comment on what you were provided? Marilyn?
Just agreement that we have a lot more work to do, a lot more reading to do, and we need a lot more time to talk about this. Special meeting or longer meeting or day.
Thank you. Mike?
I agree. I mean, this is a really fascinating subject and complex, and it's in our mandate to preserve areas of cultural value, and so we're going to need to address it. I'm really thrilled that Amy is on our board now, because we have some information from someone who's been in the field. I assume I'm not going to put too much pressure on you, Amy, but you know, I'm glad you're on the team, and I look forward to you and Doug and others telling us sort of how this is going to be going. It's going to be a long term, it seems to me, nothing short term.
Amanda?
Yeah, I wanted to give time for all the commissioners to comment, but I have a kind of a secondary topic under this.
Can I wait then and ask Brian to check in?
Yeah.
Please, sorry, thank you. Brian, any comment?
Yeah, thanks, Krista. I like what I'm hearing, and I think it's high time we start this conversation. I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up. I missed a beat somewhere because I have not seen the materials that, did you send them, Doug? I don't know.
They were in the meeting packet. There was two parts that were, I think, included in the document of the stewardship stuff, and then there was one that the Wayne Suttles work was we could not get reduced to send, so we ended up putting a link to that in a Dropbox folder.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed them. I'll go back and look again. Thank you very much for your initiative on this.
Okay. Any other commissioners? I think I've got everybody. Okay, Amanda?
So we received a request from the Coast Salish Youth Conservation Corps. It came through Sam Barr to host a canoe journey landing at the Watmow Addition at the Higgins property. So the program that they're trying to do is considered a challenge paddle, and it would be a 3-night circumnavigation of Lopez. And a challenge paddle is considered they're only coming by canoe. There's no ground crew. So if you've been to a canoe journey, there's often a lot of vehicle support that is joining the group every night. So I just wanted to bring this forward to the commission. This is an opportunity to support the tribal canoe families and their journey. They're asking to stay at Watmow for 1 night at the Addition site, and I can provide more details.
Did you give a date on that? I'm sorry, I missed it.
July 11th.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, thanks for that, Amanda. So, can we punt any decision on this? It's a little, sorry. It's a little tricky because there are 8 treaty tribes that have adjudicated usual and accustomed area in the San Juan Islands. And the Samish Indian Nation, which not to get into tribal politics, but I just want to check and make sure. So this is an initiative of Samish Indian Nation. This is very separate from the treaty tribes, Coast Salish canoe journeys. And I just want to better understand sort of what the proposal is. Anyway, all that to say, if we could please not take action on this today, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So Amanda, it's that's why I was asking the date. Is the decision at our next meeting sufficient time for them with planning?
Sure. It would be helpful to know that the goal of the trip is to make the crossing from Anacortes to the south end of Lopez, and Watmow is really an ideal location. And then the other 2 nights are already planned. So the sooner we can have a reply, the better.
Well, okay, so I think Amy is earning the high salary that all of commissioners get paid. And I don't want to fly in the face of that resource. So I guess at all, because it's a good introduction. It's a very complex relationship. And the more careful we are without being inactive, the better. So I guess my suggestion might be that in principle, if the commission is supportive of providing and participating in that canoe journey, we could give our tentative approval and just waiting to see what information, if there's any specific discomfort or questions that Amy has related to the request, then we bring it back in April. But if she's able to find out, gather the information she needs to say that it looks good, then we should allow it to move forward. Or how do people feel about doing that? And Amy, is that enough for you? And Aaron, I'll get to you in just a second.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Krista. I think that's fine. And I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in something that's good. I just need to, there's a lot of tension between some of the northern Puget Sound Treaty Tribes and Samish, and it's complicated, and I don't want to drag any of that into this, but I just, since I'm here and I work for the Swinomish tribe, which is one of the treaty tribes with adjudicated UNA in the San Juans. I would just ask if we can just sort of take a moment, not to derail anything, but I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So Amy, I'll just pitch in. It's my understanding that this isn't only this is not just a Samish only event, that it would be extended to canoe families from Lummi, Swinomish, Tulalip, and Stillaguamish.
Yeah, that helps. That unfortunately doesn't allay my concern. But thank you. And I will do my best. One of our senators that I work with closely. Sorry, it's too many things going on. Yeah, so I will touch base and get back to you next week. I'll make a commitment to do that.
Okay. So is that okay with the rest of the commissioners that we give tentative approval unless something comes back from Amy? And
Can
Brian,
I-
is that a question or a hands up?
I'll just jump in. I think if we say we're going to give tentative approval, I think we might want to indicate that we've got some kind of guidelines or parameters that we will want to propose, having to do with, how the property is left, numbers of people, et cetera, et cetera. If that's appropriate. But I also think that I'm not surprised this request is coming, and that property just has so much history of native use out there.
Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah, I respect Amy's need and as part of the commission to investigate this a little further. And I'd be a little reluctant to say we've approved it, but, because in case we decide there's something more that makes it a little more difficult for us. This is the first time I've ever been faced as a commissioner with this kind of decision. And I think we should basically say it will be on the agenda for April. Unless the commission wants to hold a special call in a week or so to accommodate everybody, give Amy a chance to tell us what she thinks.
Marilyn?
Just a new commissioner question. Do we have a use agreement that we utilize for these types of requests? And would this be?
We have different types of agreements, but this is really kind of the first time around for something like this. It will not be the last, I can guarantee you that, but this is kind of new territory.
Marilyn, would you like to give consensus, or would you rather have it come back in April? I'm just going to go around and ask people.
I'm interested in hearing about, as we're getting into these areas, I would like to hear what Amy's recommendations are. So I would like to see it in April if possible. Thank you.
Okay. Brian, would you like it in April, or what's your preference?
Yes, I agree with Mike's comment. Although I'm personally feel like I'd like to welcome the event. I respect Amy's caveat on it. And I think it would be better to give them full approval or not in April, rather than give a consensus approval now and have to go back on it later. So I would tend to wait. I would also ask if Amy could, in the interim, provide some additional information on what she's saying through Krista or Lincoln that we could look at and sort of digest before having the conversation in April.
Okay, Sandy?
I agree with everything Brian just said. I'm supportive in concept, and I don't feel I have enough information, and I need to hear more from Amy.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Lisa, who, as you all know, we're lucky to have of Swinomish heritage. And I just, there were some parts of the meeting materials I got to, but then we had the catastrophe happen yesterday, and I'm a little behind on things. So I apologize for not sort of seeing this coming and checking ahead. And again, I think it sounds good, especially from what Lisa knows, which definitely seems, thankfully, to be more than me at the moment. So let me just continue to do my due diligence, and I'm happy to circle back with folks next week if that can work for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, then, and to be fair, I don't think this proposal or request was part of the meeting material, so it was news to me right now. So, okay, I'm going to go. We will bring this back in April, and as Amy does her investigation and reconnaissance, and then can provide us any information before the next meeting, that would be helpful. Thank you. So. We've covered two really meaty topics today, and we still have an executive session to do. I need to know, I want to respect everybody's time, but I think we are going to have to extend this meeting maybe till 11:30. And I need to know if commissioners are able to do that.
Yes.
Marilyn, yes, okay.
So
Sandy?
this is
Yes,
Amy. I actually have a
yes.
couple of phone calls I have to return on the BNSF, so I probably can go to 11:15, but then I'm gonna have to get off. I apologize.
Okay. Doug, you have a comment?
Yeah, just really quickly, so I know you'll also be talking about future agenda items and whatnot, and I did want to pass on that there was a strong request from the tribal members who were interested in coming and having a conversation with the commission, that if that could happen in person, there's a very strong preference for that. Understand that is just a month out, and it might take some finagling if it were to happen, or if this were to be able to be scheduled as a special meeting. There just was a feeling that would be much more useful in facilitating sort of dialogue. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I need to allow Tanya to at least summarize our community conversations that are coming up in April. I don't know if we're going to get into, that is really the bulk of the communications committee's work in the past month. So if you will give us those dates, confirm with the commission and attendees when those are happening in April.
Thanks for the segue.
Yeah.
So we do have Brian, you will be happy to know they will be live, or hybrid, I should say, so people can come and sit in person. So we have organized April 19th for District 1, April 12th for, those are the dates from the meeting. So but those are correct. The 19th for District 2, actually, and then I'm reading them out of order, but the dates are correct. April 19th is District 1. April 12th is District 2. And then Tuesday, April 25th, will be District 3. And I will send all this out to you. You don't have to worry about writing it down. And the goal is to have preserve updates or district updates. And we've got specific preserves. We'll talk about Watmow at District 3, North Shore update at District 2, and then we have some possibilities for District 1, which we'll sort out with staff. Could be Beaverton, Katy Mountain, We're going to do it later in the evening. The committee thought trying a 6:30 to 8 o'clock timeframe might be a little more beneficial, give people time for food. And for Orcas, we've confirmed the date with the Orcas Fire Hall, which is where we used to have the monthly commission meetings on Orcas. The the Mullis Center for, the library for District 1 for San Juan Island. And for District 2, it is the Family Resource Center. So that's the synopsis, and I'd be happy to send you more of a written update with more details, so I don't take up time here. Brian, I think you have a question?
So Tanya, does a hybrid meeting mean that staff will be there with the, is it the pet owl?
So for Orcas, you're going to be the guinea pig with the owl, and yes. And so our hope is that staff and commissioners from each island will be able to be in person. Considering how the ferries have been, I'd say low chance that other islands will come, but won't rule it out, their staff, but so that nobody gets stuck anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that update. So I'm going to move into executive session so we can at least have, Mike?
Oh, yeah, forget it. Let's go to executive session.
Okay.
I'll talk to Tanya.
Okay. I'm going to move into executive session. I know we brought up the topic of second public comment, so.
Wait, sorry, Krista, I'm trying to figure out, I've never stopped recording via Teams. I could probably.
Don't stop it yet. I just have a few things to say about going into executive session. So we will go in for a matter of real estate acquisition, and I believe